Hey, nurses out there, it's Jana Price. Thank you for joining us again on another episode of Nurse Converse. Today, we are going to be diving into some pretty deep material with Lora Smith, who is a nurse in Iowa. I want to go ahead and preface this by saying that there is a trigger warning for this show. We are going to be talking about violence and we are going to be talking about the loss of a pregnancy. If you are not comfortable with this, we want to let you know that's okay. This may not be the episode for you, but if you would like to join us, we do want you to know that we are honestly here for you. We care about you. And Lora has a story that she wants to tell that resonates with every nurse right now in the field that change needs to happen. So let's go ahead and get started today. Lora, thank you for joining us. And also with Lora today, and this is really encouraging for you nurses out there, we have Bobby. Bobby is Rehkemper is going to be Lora's attorney, and he works in the government accountability section of law, and he has been doing this for 22 years. He is here supporting Lora. It is great to have somebody on our side as far as nurses are concerned considering this. So, Lora, go ahead and tell us just a little bit about yourself, how long you've been a nurse, and we'll pass it off to Bobby and let him tell a little bit about himself.
Well, thanks for having me. My name is Lora Smith, and I have been a nurse now for about 6 years, or about 5 years. I graduated in Michigan out of Grand Valley State, and so I've been in medicine for 19 though. But I've been a nurse now for just over 5 years.
Awesome. Bobby, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm an attorney. Gorley, Rehkemper, and Lindholm is the long word for the law firm. Practice primarily in government accountability. I get to sue the government when they engage in misconduct that results in injuries to other people. So I consequently always drive the speed limit and make sure I use my turn signal.
There you go. Great advice for all of us out there. Yeah. All right, guys. So let's go ahead and hop into this. First off, we want to start by saying healthcare violence. It is on the rise. It has been on the rise. This is nothing new. It's happening to everyone. It's happened to me. And most likely, if you're a nurse out there, it has happened to you. And if it hasn't happened, it most likely will. We obviously have what's happened out in Florida. We had Nurse Leela. She was violently beat within an inch of her life and is still going through the ramifications of what happened when somebody attacked her. We had the shooting out in UPMC back in February where the patient's family member came in and held a nurse, doctors hostage, zip tied them, and then unfortunately a security guard lost their life. This is just the tip of it. These are things that are happening every day, and somehow it doesn't seem like it's reaching the radar. It seems like we know about it in the world of nursing, but it's just not seeming to get out there. So here we are. We're nurses in this field, and Lora's here today to tell us a little bit about what happened to her and what she's doing to make a change in the world of nursing. So, Lora, let's start out. You told us how you became a nurse. What made you want to be a nurse? Why did you decide to get into this field to begin with?
So nursing started for me all the way back at age 6. So, Christmas morning, and back in the day, they had these cute little doctor kits that, you could get in this blue little plastic suitcase with these plastic Band-Aids that I found fascinating then. And it really never changed from that point on. I knew I wanted to be in medicine, originally wanted to do neurosurgery. And the further in the brain I got, the more complicated and backwards it became. So I decided nursing would be the stopping point there. So this has been my vocation since I was 6. There's nothing more that I've ever wanted to do.
Awesome. Lora, do you have a family at home?
I do. I have a husband, and we have 5 great kids. 4 are still living at home, and one's there in Michigan. And so, yes, we do. We have a family, and we have 4 dogs.
Oh, wow. So you're nurse, mom, you're doing it all. Awesome.
Some days it's busy.
Before you were a nurse, what are some other jobs that you did before you came into nursing? Like what was the shift?
So out of high school, I did worked at the girls' clothing store and retail at the mall, just had fun. And then I've worked at Planet Hollywood down there in Orlando, where we were in the military. So we moved around a lot. And then like my other big job I did before going into medicine was I drove the big brown truck for UPS for a couple of years and delivered packages down in Orlando. So I was busy.
Awesome. That's awesome. So you started out in typical retail, moved from there, and then you moved into nursing. So you've seen a lot, had your family. So Lora, actually, the reason I reached out to you is I saw your story in Iowa when you did a news story on the news, and with two other nurses who have been beat. And my heart absolutely stopped because I myself have gone through patient violence in the workplace. And one of the things that I remember when I saw you is you had this just brave look on your face. You could tell that this had been such a terrible trauma to you, but at the same time, you were telling your story. And I truly admired you for that. And so today I want you to tell us what happened on the day of your incident, and as much as you're comfortable telling us what happened, and as much I know that this is a hard time for you, because this is in fact the week that it happened. So it's a hard week. So we're here for you. And I know that anybody out there that you're listening right now, that hearing Lora's story, it's really going to touch some heartstrings. And I hope that as you're listening, if you are going through it, I know Lora's on your side. I'm on your side. And we want to hear what Lora has to say, and the strength that she brings to this, as well as the wisdom that she's going to come out with this.
So on this specific day, just backing a little bit, my husband and I had gone through about 6 months of IVF treatments to conceive our little guy. And it was on June 15th of last year. And I went to work like an everyday normal ordeal. And this day in question, I was the charge nurse on one of the kids' floors. And that morning, roughly 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning, the kids would go out for a rec time. And so the charge nurse, being myself that day, also could be your med passing nurse, your run the floor type nurse. We're on the floor, we're accounted on the floor, we're in the back, we're doing orders, we do everything. And so I needed all of my staff because we are constantly understaffed there. I mean, every day. We never had enough staff in the entire duration I worked there. There were maybe, I can count on one hand how many days we were fully staffed. So this morning in question, I needed to send all of my RTWs, my residential treatment workers, out to rec time with the kids in order for them to be able to go outside. And so they packed up, they got ready to take the kids down, and there was one young man that was unable to leave the unit because of behaviors, previous day behaviors and restraints. So we had to make sure that somebody could stay back with him on the unit. During this time, he got very frustrated when he realized one of his favorite workers was not going to be staying back on the unit with him. I needed that worker to specifically be an adult body to go outside with these kids to make sure the ratios were as close to policy as we could get it. And so as soon as all the workers and other children left the unit, he immediately started flipping tables and flipping over chairs. And these are psych safe chairs. So they're full of sand. They're made that way so that kids, adults, anybody inside cannot just pick them up and throw them across a room. And so he's knocking all of these things over. And I go out and I'm like, what's going on? I try to talk to him. We've had usually pretty good rapport. And he had just said, well, I want this specific worker to stay back with me, basically to kind of be like a one-to-one for him. But he wasn't on one-to-one status. So I told him that wasn't going to be possible because I needed this worker to go outside. And he refused to pick up the tables, refused to pick up the chairs. So I radioed for this specific worker. I noticed they hadn't left our second day room area yet where they were all lined up. So I did ask him to return back to the unit for a minute before they went outside to see if he could de-escalate the situation even more and explain to this young man, why he couldn't stay back. And this young man had been there for several months, so he knew the policies, he knew the routine, he knew the expectations. And this day, it just didn't go well. And we got him at least to pick up a couple of the chairs and at least the tables. And I thought everything was going to be okay. So I went ahead and sent this worker back on his way with the children to not delay rec time. And then I decided to go into the nurse's office at that point because this young man was the only one on the ward. So when you're the only one left on the unit, we don't have to have a staff right there with you because we can see through the plexiglass of the nurses' stations into that day room. So I went ahead and let him just vent, be by himself, calm, try to get himself calmed down. I went into the nurses' station. And then all of a sudden I look up from where I'm sitting, where I'm processing all the orders for the morning, processing all the new medications, getting things written in because they still use paper charting there. So everything takes 10 times longer than it would if we were at a regular hospital. And so after that, I looked up and this young man is standing on top of one of the tables. So where this is an issue is I've always been told working there that there's an absolute zero tolerance in a policy that if a kid is to stand on top of the tables, it's actually supposed to be immediate restraints if they will not get down because the ceilings at this facility are not psych safe. What I mean by that is you can push the tiles up with a very brief touch of your fingertips. They're
So
like
those like
drop tiles.
Okay.
Yep.
Wow.
So kids have been in there before. And when they do, they rip down the electrical wires, they rip down metal bars, they use those as weapons. So it is a very serious thing. He can get hurt and then he's up high and we are at a disadvantage trying to get him down. So I look out and I immediately left the nurse's office. I went down to try to verbally de-escalate and just ask him, can we get down? What is it that you're actually wanting? And a lot of times when kids act out, it's because their needs are not being met. So, just going over it with him and trying to talk him down. And normally him and I have a really good relationship. So he will listen sometimes to me versus some other people because I'd been working with him for so long off and on. And that it just didn't matter. He wouldn't get down. And so I immediately get on our radios, which is our only call for assistance at this facility. We have no security in the building, no security on premises, nobody driving the perimeter. If he is to get off the unit, we are on foot chases. As nurses, as non-clinical staff, we are chasing individuals outside of the building to try to get them back. So the threat is so real to us. I had to call for additionals instead of calling a full code green, which would be, I have a combative, physically violent patient. I called and said, I need additional staff to the unit for assistance with a patient. And so I was basically fingers crossed that somebody is going to show up because at any given time or any given day, there are times nobody responds to these codes because we are all in a assigned position on our unit. So the other nurses and other staff on another unit are my security. They are my backup, which does not work. And so I called and I heard 2 responses come through over the radio. So I knew at least a couple of people were going to be coming down. So instead of engaging this young man, I stayed to the side, waited till help got there. In the meantime, when he heard me radio for additional staff, he knows what kind of happens at that point. So, which is there's going to be a lot of people show up and it's going to go either in a civil way or it could mean restraints. It could mean a seclusion type consequence for him.
Right.
So he jumps down off the table. And so I back up very quickly because he has a known violence there at the facility. And I was newly confirmed that our embryo had taken it, it implanted into my uterus just like it should. And so everything was a success. I got that call on June 14th. So this is June 15th. This is the very next day that this has happened. And so what we did was I backed up toward the nurse's station at that point to give him some space waiting on people to respond. Right as I realized we are in too close a proximity for my comfort zone. So the only way I could get away from this individual and know that I would be okay is to get myself back into the nurse's office because he is walking toward me. and I am walking backwards, tried to get away from him. And then we find that I need to get down a hallway, and he's standing somewhere close by the entrance of that hallway. So I'm going to have to cross this individual no matter how I look at it. So I start moving quickly toward the hall. I wasn't in a run, but I mean, I'm moving, and he just turns in right at me at the hall, like by the entrance, and he knees me in my stomach as hard as he can. And he did it right as to the first two staff members were coming through the door to help. And I know one of them for sure saw the ending of his knee coming down. And in the meantime, I had a med passer that was in the back of the units. When she heard me call for additionals, she is flying from the back of our unit, but every door is a key lock. So there is no badging. There's no quick movement through the unit. It is a key for every door. And that's if the key locks worked.
Right. You're wrestling keys to try to get it open.
Yes. And then it's getting the right key. And a lot of times the key locks on this unit don't work properly. So you're jamming in a key. Sometimes the key doesn't come out. Sometimes the key doesn't turn all the way. So you have all these issues. And I just hear her yelling that she was on her way. But she's right as she comes through the back hallway, she's coming from the back. I'm trying to come in from the front. She saw the knee hit my stomach. So she is trying to rush me into the office while these other two individuals are trying to contain this young man who has now become extremely violent. He is trying to headbutt one of these young men in the face. He is trying to knee one of them in the groin. And the med passing LPN that was there that day with me, she is trying to scramble to get an IM drawn up to give to this young man because I refuse to engage at this point. So I get myself into the nurse's office, and I am literally just sitting in complete shock. Like, I don't know how else to explain it.
Lora, it sounds like to me that you were set up for failure from the beginning. And in every instance of this, it sounds like this was just a complete setup for failure. Starting from the fact that you really got me at, this is not the first time that young children, I don't know the ages, and we'll keep that to that, but we're in the ceiling of this facility with wires and using them as weapons. That sound like this is not the first time. Then you're completely understaffed. And you're saying this obviously, we all in nursing know, understaffed. Now we're understaffed with kids. So you're set up with that. You don't feel safe. You're working with so many things against you that I have to ask, how did you feel when you went to work every day? Were you concerned when you went to work for your safety every day?
Every day. So we're set up for failure there in every aspect. So we do not have security. We do not have cameras that had been purchased over 2 years before this incident, but they had not installed the security cameras. And I say this verbatim from the DON out to me, was that they feared how many people would no longer be working there if the cameras had gone up. And this was in at least 2023 that statement was made. So this now is an injury in 2024, and that they had already purchased these cameras, but they had not gone up in the facility. So we didn't have cameras. We didn't have security. We didn't have adequate staffing. We don't have psych safe ceilings. We don't have a badge access in and out of doors. So everything is 10 times longer. Things break. You've got unpsych safe ceilings. You've got unpsych safe units. We've got people that are not adequately trained to do these jobs. And you mix all of that in together, and it is a disaster. You're supposed to have ratio numbers by policy there.
Right.
And these ratio numbers absolutely, other than, like I said, about a handful of times, never, ever happened. We are mandated overtime there. So, I never thought that this was a thing. Like, I never understood what it meant when you're mandated at this much overtime. But just to put it into perspective, my first 1 calendar year there, so you're talking June 29 of 23 to 7/1 of 24, I had 802 overtime hours on top of a regular 40-hour scheduled work week. And, the radios that we had were our only lifeline. So, and the radios malfunctioned at least once a shift. So what would happen is when you get on the radio and you call for backup, you call a code, you call for help, our radios then go into what's called a lockout status, which is against OSHA. It's a safety, it's a huge safety concern. So our radios then go to a lockout mode that nobody else can get on the radio at that time. Nobody else can use their radios. And this is facility wide. It's not unit wide. This is the whole facility. And then a message, when you hit that code button, your emergency button on your radio, it goes to switchboard. Switchboard then calls the code, repeats the code back onto the radio. So everybody's radio beeps, and it's like an emergency beep. The switchboard comes over and tells you what the code is and what unit is asking for additional staff. But there are times when the units were incorrect. The position or the location of the incident on the unit is not correct. There are dozens of times I showed up for codes on other units and we were on the wrong unit.
So you're not only going to work, you're scared. It sounds like staff is in danger. These adolescents are in danger. You have now come to work on that day. You've been dealing with this prior to the 802 hours that you've just worked in fear, being forced to work under unbearably unsafe conditions. I mean, that is hearing some of these things. I haven't worked psych, but I've thought I've worked on some pretty bad floors, but this is nightmarish. And now you've had this incident happen and you're terrified. What happened next?
I mean, the next hour after, within an hour of this happening, I have contacted our hospital supervisors. I have contacted everybody and anybody of title to let them know that I had been assaulted. Everybody at the facility, and I mean every person who was involved with me, knew our IVF journey. Other people started getting interested in IVF, like over my husband and I's journey of this. It was very public, known across the facility, because there's nights I needed injections at 8:00 at night, and one of the hospital soups would give it. One of my nurse coworkers would give it, so that I never missed my time frames on all of our IVF things. And so, you look at that, and I'm sitting there in complete shock. And I mean, I've let everybody know what's happened, and I fill out this slip. And again, this is paper, so paper burns. And this paper is a green slip, and that is the only injury reporting process that they have there. So I fill out this green slip within this first hour of the injury. And I'm letting them know how it happened, who witnessed it, all the events that took place, what was the outcome, what did you try to do before, we had to call for IMs and restraints. It's just like that whole process.
Right.
Well,
and then comes the, what could you have done better?
And that is the absolute first question that
Yep.
you are always asked by
Always.
one of the hospital supervisors is, well, what could you have done differently? At this point in time, I'm not even entertaining the question, because I can't think. And so I turn in the green slip and I asked to be seen. And what I was told that day was, we cannot send you out if you don't have immediate signs of something wrong, because we don't have anybody to replace you today. And I was the charge nurse, so we had nobody. And the med passer was an LPN, and the LPN cannot do charge. So they told me that they had nobody. So I had to sit there the rest of the day with this individual and take care of them, and still be on the unit until 11 or 11:30 that night.
I am so sorry to hear this. This is beyond tragic. Everything that you've had to go through for the entire 802 hours until what culminated into this terrible, terrible event, and the way you were treated by administration. I know that there's not a nurse out here right now that's not listening this is the story. This is it. What could we have done different in a situation that has set us up for failure? Many of us have been set up for failure. And Bobby, this is where I want to ask you a question as far as in these situations when Lora has what's going on, what rights do we have when we experience workplace violence? What are our rights as human beings over being just nurses?
The very first one is the fact that everybody has the right to a safe work environment that's free from violence. Right? That's the overarching rule for everybody in any profession, in any industry. But then the next is that every employee, especially in the nursing profession, has the right to report their concerns. Then there's also the right to then receive the appropriate medical treatment, the appropriate response to those concerns. And then ultimately they have the right to be free from retaliation for reporting these concerns. And that, I think, is one of the greatest fears of anybody in the nursing profession is, if I report, when I report, what happens to me then? Because there's always ways that employers run around and paper, try to manipulate records and manipulate their responses in a way that adversely affects those that are willing to stand up and scream at the top of their lungs that this place isn't safe.
Right. In situations, what is the best advice? Let's say anybody experiences workplace violence. What is the very first steps that a nurse should take in order to protect themselves right after the injury or the incident happens?
Document, report. And I don't mean once or twice, I mean layers, because the documentation is crucial and the layers of reporting is crucial. Not a in-person conversation. This is in writing. This is in various levels, whether it's OSHA, whether it's professional regulations. Everybody needs to be notified so that there is that trail of accountability, because that's how they avoid. That's what they try to do, is escape and then point fingers again back at the people that are putting their lives at risk and are getting injured because of their own deficiencies.
Right. Thank you, Bobby. I think many of us nurses needed to hear that out there, that you are justified in doing what's right, like Lora did, reporting, seeking help, saying this is unsafe. So you guys have heard it from the mouth of an attorney who is out there protecting people like us nurses. So thank you, Bobby. Lora, how are you doing today? How are you physically and mentally and emotionally?
It's rough. It's just rough. I am in counseling, so I'm doing like extensive EMDR. I try to go every week, but sometimes like my schedule just doesn't allow. So I go at least 2 or 3 times a month. I have a great counselor and therapist that's trying to help me work through a lot of these things that have affected my everyday life now, as far as even at home, at work, in public. It's rough. And I still get up and I still go to work. I travel nurse now. And so it allows me a lot more freedom in selecting the facilities I want to work at. They cannot mandate me overtime. So there are some reasons. The only way I could stay in nursing was to get out of the facility. So, it's the aftermath of the injury that I feel like this facility failed me as well, though. So this injury happened on a Saturday, and I still had to report to work Sunday, and I still had to go to work on Monday, because you get written up if you haven't had prior time off request, and that is considered an unexcused absence. And so I didn't have any bleeding at that time on Saturday, the rest of my shift on Sunday during my shift. But when I woke up Sunday morning, I knew something was wrong. And at this point, I was in such denial. I hadn't even told my husband about the assault because I didn't want him to just be devastated. So I went to work on Sunday. I had been told that it wasn't pre-approved, so I had to be there. So I was there on Sunday. And then I showed up on Monday, and I knew that Monday, right after work, I was going to be heading to get labs done. It's just part of the IVF process. And so I got down there and I found out, they informed me that my HCG levels were rapidly declining. And so I knew then that we were losing him. And so the first person I actually called when I got the call from the hospital was, I called my boss, and it took like 7 times to call before somebody answered. And then I was told, I'm sorry, but I have to go because there's chaos on the unit. So it wasn't even really acknowledged then. So that night, so now we're on the 17th, that night, I started actively bleeding out home. So I knew that it was, it was happening. And on Wednesday, on Monday, I told them, obviously, when I got a hold of my boss after I got that news, I said, I will not be in for the rest of the week, period. Like, will not be there. On Wednesday, I was sitting on the couch with my husband, and one of the hospital supervisors texted me and reminded me that I had signed up for voluntary overtime on Sunday and that I was expected to be there for my shift. So that was initially the week of losing him. So I go into work on Sunday, like I can't afford to just lose my job either. So I go in on Sunday and I realize I'm still being forced to take care of this young man on the unit. They have not removed him from the unit to the other kids unit, which is where he originally started. And so they now are making me care for this young man that has assaulted me and has caused the death of our unborn son. And I had to, for the next multiple days, continue to take care of him until finally I got a hold of the right people. And I said, it's either I quit effective immediately or this young man gets moved off my unit because I cannot care for him. I just couldn't do it.
Right.
And so I was told that he would be moving off the unit. And then our superintendent called me on the unit and said, we're putting a hold on that transfer. And I said, no, we're not. And he said, yeah, we are, because it's been the first 6-day stretch since he's been admitted that he hasn't had restraints. And so again, my care and my concern came secondary. And so eventually that day he did get moved later off of the unit. But even, what continued to follow was just unbelievable. This young man continued to target me from the other unit and was drawing tombstones on the walls upstairs that said Baby Boy Smith in the tombstone. And my hospital supervisors saw it and asked my coworkers to not tell me. And then later, about a week or two later, I was then forced to be charge nurse on that unit that he housed on again. And so just the repeated exposure, the dishonesty, knowing that he was still targeting me, drawing it on walls, drawing it on paper. He thought it was funny. Multiple times he had told other peers he had killed a kid. And, I let my boss, my DON, I let the hospital supervisors know, that was like super unsafe for me to continue to be anywhere around this, this young man. And it just
enough is enough.
Yeah. And it went unheard. I still was forced to take care of him, which I would always do no matter what, but it just was like, I just had zero desire.
Right. Because enough is enough. We are human. We are human. And I know as nurses, we're expected to go and take care of everybody. And we do. And we push ourselves so far that I think oftentimes we forget that, and other people forget, we are human before we are nurse. And so I just am so sorry to hear everything that you've gone through, Lora. It is unspeakable. And it just is a shame that somebody like yourself goes and works in such a vulnerable population in psychiatry. It's a hard job. And you go and you're vulnerable and you give of yourself and you're set up for failure and then you're just dismissed. And I know that pain is just unbearable. But,
and there is targeting and there is retaliation that happens. And, I would experience that as well. I was on June 28th, I was written up for missing the week that I lost our son because it was unauthorized, pre-approved absence. And so I received a write-up on June 28th for that. And then when the day I got back, they asked me to fill out a green slip. And I found that was very odd to ask of me because I'd already filled one out the day of the injury. And they said, well, we can't find it. So then I get back and I'm filling out another green slip.
so that they can at least start work comp for me, because I was going to need all kinds of stuff after that. I knew it, in which they refused. And so I not only didn't get aftercare, I also they didn't open up a work comp case for me until I sought legal representation finally. And so in October of 24, the day they received the letter from Darren, they decided to send me over my work comp claim number so that I could start getting some type of treatment and therapy, because before that, everything we had done was on our own expense.
And I know all the nurses out here, I know you're asking now legally, like, Bobby, I'm going to have you take this over where this is legally, because this is obviously a case that deserves legal attention to not only get Lora the justice she deserves, but also set the precedent. So fill us in on where we're at with that.
Yeah, so obviously Lora has a pending work comp claim, but above and beyond work comp, if we can show that there is a willful and wanton disregard of a known risk that results in an injury, we're able to bring a separate civil cause of action against the individuals responsible for the deficiencies. And so that claim is currently pending with the state of Iowa. We're required to give them 6 months to investigate and consider the claim before we're allowed to withdraw it and then go through the formal discovery process. And really the idea is to uncover all the complete and utter disregard, the callousness, the really it's abuse of the people who are serving our community, and let the public know what's actually going on behind closed doors to force the change, because change doesn't happen voluntarily or out of the goodness of the government. Sometimes you have to extract it out of them, and that's what we're in the process of getting ready to do next.
Awesome. Thank you, Bobby. Lora, what are your next steps now? I know that we've spoken about advocacy, and I think by you speaking out as you are now, it's incredibly brave, and you are making a change in nursing. You're setting up. So many people will hear this, and so many people have heard it. And what you're doing is you're telling people that it's okay to tell your story. It's safe to tell your story. And there are people like Bobby and other people who have come behind you, and they're going to not stand for this. And so what do you want to tell a nurse who has gone through what you've gone through, who's going through it, and who is going to face this in the future? What advice can you give to them based on your experience?
First of all, there's no job worth your life. And, I ultimately left there. I resigned October 17th of last year. So it took me a little bit, even after the assault, to get everything wrapped up to where I was in a position to exit from the facility. There are people inside of our gross negligent lawsuit that are still working there, and they still struggle every day. And I tell nurses, like, it's not the expectation to go to work and be assaulted. And I am really tired of hearing this is what you signed up for. And it's not what you sign up for. Psych is, if I'm not mistaken, still the most demanded form of medicine right now, that and geriatrics. And nobody wants to do psych because of this right here. It is dangerous. We know it's dangerous, but it's not impossible. You have to have security. You have to have the emergency responses in place so that if something is even looking like it could go in this direction, there are people and resources immediately at our hands that we are able to use to help protect us. And there needs to be adequately trained staff in de-escalation, in proper, restraint, application, seclusion. And most of these individuals at this facility are not adequately trained. And so, I tell nurses it's okay to reach out. It is okay to stand alone, because there are many times there I stood very alone in speaking up for what was right. And again, that's frowned upon. You're seen as intimidating. You're seen as bold. You're told that most people don't complain about these things. And I will forever continue to speak up. like I'm involved with some of the psychiatric nurses associations, even in Michigan. I, was very involved there with Anna. I know a lot of nursing students that are very aware of what Anna is, like go to those seminars in San Diego. Like I'm going to actively continue to speak out. You can't ask nurses to step into the most needed field if you don't have the proper security to keep us safe. And,
Absolutely.
The biggest thing is when I would walk in that door there for work, I never knew if I was going to go home in the same condition that I went to work in. And I knew to leave way before this happened. And I did not do it. It is the single biggest regret I have is when I knew safety was not a priority, when I knew patients were violent with no consequences and repercussions, when I saw that management didn't care, when I saw the ungodly amounts of overtime that they would force people to do, and the countless 16-hour shifts back to back to back that they would mandate people to do, I knew there was a possibility I wouldn't go home in the same condition I went in. And every day I mentally prepped for that. I tried to make sure, and this sounds so crazy, but like I always would say, like, I need to make sure I have my running shoes on for the day, because at any time I also would be a code yellow responder where I'm chasing people outside of the facility across 4 lanes, main highways, to get them back to the facility until somebody can meet me in the middle of cornfields, meet me and, crossing all these lanes of traffic. It is truly, in all of my years of medicine, 19 years of medicine, it is the most unsafe environment and facility I have ever stepped foot in. And as a travel nurse, I've been to Illinois, I've been to Iowa, I've been, I've done medicine in Florida, Virginia, like all these places. And it is tenfold the worst I have ever been in. And I knew that. And I tell people, do not stay if it doesn't feel right. There is nothing there's no amount of money to replace your body parts that you can't fix. Like, I can't fix this. I can't make this right. I can't bring Levi back. But now I get to speak out. Now I get, I have a great legal team helping us navigate this. We have a great, representative for all of our stuff we do with the public. Leslie, she's just amazing. Bobby, Darren, like our team is amazing. So you have to have a team around you that's going to support you, that supports your cause, that supports, why you get up and go to work every single day, knowing your environment is unsafe, knowing that things can happen. But what there is no excuse for is management not protecting you as a nurse. You should never have to choose between your safety and your job, or your job in itself and staying home. Like they make you choose, and there shouldn't be a choice. You should be able to do exactly what you love and be cautious, but not fear for your safety every day you walk through the doors.
Lora and Bobby, I want to thank you so much for coming on today. And Lora, we'll continue to follow you. I know that, guys, if you want to follow her story, you can follow her. In the article, I'll leave some links for her, so you can follow her journey and you can see what's going to happen as this moves forward legally and as she moves forward in her advocacy journey. So, guys, thank you for joining us on Nurse Converse today. It has been a pleasure having Lora and Bobby on today, and we look forward to great things for both of them to come. But we also know that you guys are out there doing great things as nurses as well. So stay safe out there, and thanks once again for being a nurse, guys.